Well, you know the protocols now. Keep your mics on mute unless you wish to speak, and put your hand up if you do wish to speak, the electronic hand or the chat function. And please keep your phones on silent. And I think those are all the protocols. We will be recording this. Is this for public? Yeah. So it's for public. So first item on the agenda then is to welcome everybody. I'm Councillor Doreen Jones and I'm chairing the meeting today. Can I ask for the roll call to be taken, please?
Yeah, thank you. We've got apologies from Councillor Neath, Councillor Anthony Taylor and Sheena Rees. Right, so we got the chair, Councillor Doreen Jones.
I'm here.
Councillor Dean Causey.
Present, Emma.
Councillor Leanne Jones.
Present.
Councillor Sharon Freegard.
Present, Nadine.
Councillor Sandra Miller.
Present.
Councillor Scott Bamsey.
Can I send apologies for Scott? He's in work.
Oh, okay, thank you. Councillor Joel Hale.
Present, Nadine.
Councillor Nigel Hunt.
Emma.
Councillor Simon Noyle.
Nadine, I'm here, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jane Jones.
I'm here, Nadine.
Councillor Karen Clement Williams.
Yes, yeah.
Councillor Peter Rees.
I'm here.
Councillor Alan Lockyer.
Present, Nadine.
Councillor Annette Wingrave. No. And Councillor...
Apologies from Councillor Wingrave.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Peter Richards.
Present, Nadine.
We go on to officers now. Andrew Thomas.
Present.
Tom Owen.
Present.
And Nicola.
Present.
Have I missed anyone out? I think that was it, wasn't it? Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Okay, next item on the agenda then, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, I don't see any. And item 3 is the restructure and appointment of senior management posts within the Education, Leisure and Lifelong Learning Directorate. I'll take the papers as read. I assume you've read all the papers. I don't know. Do you want to add anything before we go into any questions, Andrew?
Can I just take 5 minutes, Chair, just to give members a sort of a bit of background to the rationale for this, and then obviously take any questions. Is that okay? It will.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Our directorate has always operated with 3 heads of service. It's quite a broad directorate in terms of sort of the disciplines we're responsible for. That changed back in 2014, 2015, I think it was, when God rest his soul, Russell left us and went to be the managing director of Celtic Leisure. And Aled, well, he still is the director, took the view that we could operate, particularly smack bang in the middle of sort of austerity, that we needed to reduce our sort of strategic posts at senior management team level. And that was fine. It was in response to the need at the time. And I think we've been through an Aston inspection since then, and we did very well at that. So we managed that to operate with 2 heads of service across a very broad directorate. Essentially, Russell's remit was split up between myself and Chris Millis, and Ali took on some of the responsibilities as well. That was then, and of course, what this report highlights is the challenges that we face right now. I don't need to explain to members in terms of COVID the recovery responsibility that our schools and the directorate has just in terms of COVID. We've also got the education reform agenda, which in 2022, the new curriculum comes into our schools. There's still a lot of preparatory work and support work we need to do with our schools. So that on top of COVID is going to be a big strategic challenge. We've also got additional learning needs reform, which members of the Education Committee will have had reports on, and that's the single biggest change to SEN legislation that the country's had for 20, 30 years. We've also got early years. In a number of our Aston Inspections reports, we've been challenged around our young people and their lack of preparedness of when they come into school, their ability to learn. In our last inspection, we reported that 48% of our young people coming into foundation phase weren't ready to learn. Now that's a big challenge for us, and that's something, if we can address that, can go a long way to tackling a number of the agendas we have in Neath, Talbot, not least of which is poverty, but also at the end of their academic life, hopefully, if we address how prepared children are to learn when they come into school, and we know we've got a good school system, when they leave, their outcomes should be better. And also, we've got a new sort of landscape around our leisure portfolio. I can't say too much about this, but members do know that we're out at the moment for a national procurement exercise to appoint a new operator. If we appoint a new operator, that is going to be a completely different relationship between the council and the new operator than we've got with Celtic Leisure currently. Celtic Leisure is essentially an in-house company that was set up from staff within Neath Talbot, and that is what I would call a soft relationship. You know, it's a very amiable one, and because a lot of the staff work and they used to work for the local authority. Any new operator, obviously those staff would transfer to a new operator, so there's no risk there. But of course, we are going to have to manage that situation in a different way than the one we are currently. So that's going to put some challenges before us going forward. So all these things are on the landscape. I take a post on the 1st of April, and I want to increase our strategic capacity to plan and improve our services going forward for the reasons that I've just explained. Those are the challenges that we face. And also all the day-to-day challenges that we face as a directorate as well. So that's the rationale. In terms of its funding, there are 2 posts which I know I can lose. Both of them are vacant at the moment, so there's no redundancies here. So those increasing the senior management team by 1, in fact, there's a management saving, there's an overhead saving at the end of it, which is obviously a good thing in these difficult times. So before we go to recommendations, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions, but that's the rationale behind the report before you today.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Are there any questions? Councillor Hale?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Andrew, just a quick question. When you said there's 48% of the early years were not ready to learn, do we know which schools they are, or is it generally across the whole of the board?
We know where the pupils are. Yes,
Right.
It's not schools because obviously they're entering schools. It's
Yeah.
Yes, we do know because the schools baseline them obviously, and that's where we get that information from.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks.
And it's not a surprise. It's not a criticism of our early years providers. There's ALN reform. I've mentioned that. We're now going to be responsible for 0 to 25, which means as part of that, we've got a whole set of young people now, and this is the right thing. It's the right thing to do. But we're responsible now for 0 to 3s. The council's responsible for identifying any additional learning needs in those young people and providing for them as well. And if we do that going forward, when they enter school, if they've had their needs identified and met earlier, that's one key aspect of making sure that children are more prepared to learn when they go to school. So it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, Sandra?
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, what you've said about the early years provision. What improvements are there going to be in relation to Flying Start? Because obviously Flying Start is under health. And what relationship is there going to be there? Because obviously Flying Start starts off with a health visitor aspect. So what's the relationship going to be there? And because that ties into the ALN as well, because if we're doing 0 to 25, you know, we have to have that relationship with health. I'm not confident that we can pull that one round because we've had flying start for a while, and yet we're still in a position where children are going unprepared into the school setting.
You know what you've just said is absolutely right. Flying Start is a partnership, you know, between health. You're right. Health visitors are the key. You know, they sort of started off, but of course we've got Flying Start officers who work for the local authority as well. And I can always remember my, you know, I mentioned Russell once today. He always used to say, not everybody who lives in an economically deprived area is poor. Not every poor person lives in an economically deprived area. So it's probably true to say, Sandra, that there is over provision in some Flying Start areas in terms of certain services, and there's definitely under provision within the non-Flying Start areas where we have deprivation and high levels of need. You know, we've had issues in the past where half the street is in a Flying Start area and the other half isn't. Well, it's madness to think that the other half of the street isn't, you know, doesn't have high levels of need just because of a boundary. So one of the roles, and this is what I see a real key role for this, the head of inclusion, early years and partnership working, and that partnership part of it is a key aspect of that. And their role will be to bring partners together to make sure that the amount of resource out there to help early years, and training will be a big part of this in terms of those early years providers, upskilling those so they're the most skilled that they can possibly be, to make sure that we have a more equitable provision across the county borough and not have pockets of over provision and then large pockets of under provision where there's high levels of need. You are absolutely right, and you're well placed to speak about the challenge of developing those partnerships with health. But I think that's why I want that strategic capacity who has a focus and an experience around that going forward to try and develop those plans to make sure that those children have a better start in life. And that's the thinking behind that post. Linking the ALN need to the early years need.
All right with that, Sandra?
It is challenging. Please don't think I'm, you know, this isn't a magic elixir, but I do want to have that strategic capacity to be able to involve themselves at the highest level, planning with health to make sure that our needs for our families in all our areas are best met at an early years.
Are you okay with that, Sandra?
If I can just come back and say,
Yeah.
you know, whilst I homed in on the Flying Start provision with the health partnership, you know, health visitors per se see children from 0 till 5 anyway, and now I see a big disjoint between health visitors and Flying Start health visitors, and you know, Andrew's right in respect of, you know, you can have one side of the street to Flying Start and the other not. But of course, the nots don't actually perhaps see their health visitors regularly enough to actually be picked up in the process. So I do hope that, you know, the post that you're looking for will be able to master that divide, because many have tried and failed, Andrew.
Well, as I say, and that's why I want that dedicated resource at the right level to you know, to try and master it, as you say, because it's so important.
Dean?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Thomas.
Good morning.
Question on the report. Under financial impacts, it says that no additional funding is sought to enable a proposed restructuring, as the additional head of service post will be funded from the deletion of a senior post within the inclusion service and the deletion of the finance and data coordinator post. So, so effectively, so you're going to become director. We'll have Chris Minnis as one head of service. Your current head of service job then, that I know will be reconfigured, but that will be one head of service. And a new head of service, so you're also getting rid of then 2 other posts. So that senior post in the inclusion service, that's not your head of service post, is it? So the head of service post plus 2 others.
Yeah. To be,
and those 2 others they're empty at the moment, are they? They're vacant posts.
Yes, they are. Just to be clear, I'm actually deleting my current post and creating 2 new heads of service. So there's one additional. And there's a senior post within the inclusion service, but that's not a head of service post, obviously.
So what is that post?
It's a support officer within the inclusion service. It was put there as part of the restructuring exercise recently. To be blunt, it's been vacant for some time now, and we found other ways to deal with work. There's an awful lot of grant funding coming from Welsh Government around ALN reform, and we've been able to undertake the duties of that post through using grant funding rather than core funding. So I'm confident that we can do away with that core funded post without any impact on service delivery because of all the grant funding that we've had available to us. And so that post was vacant. That person left that post last October. And the finance coordinator post became vacant about 3 weeks ago. But that officer had been off work for a long period of time. So yes, and again, that work has been distributed between one officer within the finance directorate under Hugh Jones and the officer that's mentioned in my report, or the title of the report, the finance and schools funding officer.
Thank you very much,
So
Andrew.
basically, in terms of finance, my intention is to create one post from those 2. So there'll be some response. So I'll have to go through a job evaluation exercise with that post. There'll be additional responsibilities that might result in additional funding, but it'll be marginal compared to the loss of the coordinator's post.
Very clear. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dean.
There's no additional funding coming out from this, all being managed within the budget that you've got already. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
There's actually a slight saving, probably after year 1, because the cost of recruitment is about £25,000, which I have to say I nearly fell off my chair when I found that out. But it is important. We need the best people, so it's important that we do go looking for the best people, and there's a cost to that. So it's a one-off cost.
And that's going to be external advertising, isn't it, as well? So Oh, all right with that, Dean? Okay. Councillor Freegard, Sharon?
Thanks, Chair. Just a few points, Andrew. You're talking about the extra funding coming in for ALN. Have you considered, or did you consider just temporarily putting somebody in that ALN position to cover that aspect? Because obviously I would have thought that the COVID pressures would be perhaps a temporary post as well. So would you have considered all those? Because as we know, the foundation phase was always from birth. So it's not an issue that it was ever from 3. It was always all about providers working together. So I go back to, I think, Sandra Miller's point about Flying Start. Are you saying that by creating a new post, we will be able to definitely fill the spots, the postcode lottery spots, where children are not able to access these services? Because that's a real issue. And given that you mentioned that we were effective in the last inspection in our early years, I wonder why the need to do it in this way by having permanent posts. And had you considered the perhaps temporary posts and keeping the foundation the same? I think it brings up a lot of questions really as to how effective we really were initially in the structure, because obviously you want to change the structure. Does the structure mean and the extra funding, because you could use ALN for different spots in terms of foundation phase for filling the gaps of the postcode lottery? Thanks.
I think I understand what you mean. Just in terms of the temporary question, the temporary filling of the post, I think this is such an important issue that we need the best quality people we can. And generally, by offering permanent posts, that will enable you to attract the best people possible. So I don't think that advertising the jobs on a temporary basis is the best way to do that. And again, unless perhaps I didn't explain myself properly, these arrangements don't impact, well, they do impact, but they don't affect the way foundation phase is delivered in schools at all. This post, the head of early years inclusion and partnerships, is about ensuring that postcode lottery that you refer to is addressed so that there is a more equitable offer of support for young people, preparing them for their life in full-time education or part-time education to begin with, and then going into full-time better through bringing partners together, understanding the issues, making sure that the challenges and the blockages are addressed in a strategic way, strategic planning. There is an awful lot of resources that go into early years, and it's absolutely crucial that we make the best use of the early years. I'm not talking about schools now, Sharon, I'm talking about prior to school. The Aston Inspections I referred to, yes, it was an Aston inspection of our services, but one of those things we identified within our self-evaluation was that nearly half the children who are going into school have a deficit going into foundation phase. And I think if we can tackle those issues that are leading to that 48% of young people not prepared to learn, then I think that's the right thing to do, and I think it's a key strategic issue for the local authority. And actually early years has been an issue for the local authority in terms of preparedness to learn for a long time, and I think it's time we tackle that.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I come back on that?
Yeah.
Because for years we know that that's the case. Preparedness for school has always been part of foundation phase, that it's not been there. And what you're saying about getting the best quality people for permanent posts, well, that's good, but I hope you're not saying that we haven't got anybody internally that could meet those challenges. Because I can see that we're obviously going to be acting people up. But in terms of what we need, preparedness for school prior to 3, then yes, great. If we are definitely going to be able to target that will be really useful and beneficial for all the children. So yes, I would agree with that. And that's slightly different as well to having access to things like Flying Start. So if we can target those spots by doing this, and obviously have a report to see how well we've been doing in it, that, I would welcome that.
Well, can I just respond? That is certainly the intention, and members, obviously, certainly members of the Education Cabinet Board and Scrutiny Committee will have reports on the work of the Directorate, and this is an absolutely key, plank. Sharon, you will remember in my interview I referred to this issue, and we spoke after. And I know you've got a real passion for early years. So yes, there'll be an opportunity for members to get involved in some of this planning, certainly in terms of understanding what's going on. But yes, members will have to have regular updates in terms of the work that's going on as well. It's really important.
All right, thank you for that, Andrew. All right, Sharon. Right, I've got Councillor Clement Williams. Carol.
I have to say, yes, it is a substantial cost for recruitment. It is a big investment, but I think it's one that's well worth making. I think that, and I do welcome the fact that we're saving. I've got a couple of questions, Andrew, if I were to ask them all.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that the workload left is manageable. I'm sure it is, but I have to ask. I'm wondering if this early years stuff, I agree totally that it needs to be tackled. I can remember Steve Phillips in long time ago in council that, some kids didn't even know how to put their coat on. And I think that, there are issues there for outside of school. So will this post look at parental help and support? Example would be something like new parents normally get a package of stuff for the baby when they first have the baby. You know, would we look to put information leaflets into that and that kind of thing? You know, would that be part of this role, or you know, is there something else planned on that? Because obviously the parents have an awful lot, a big part to play in all of this. We have a responsibility to the children, of course, but we are, you know, we also need to look at what we're doing for the parents of these children as well. Just wondering what plans, if any, there are on that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Carol. To answer the question around what will this post be looking at, it'll be looking at all aspects of support for those young people, and families is such an important part of that, clearly. One of the proposals bring together a range of early years services within the Directorate currently. One of those is the Think Families First, and there are commission services within there which support new families. There's commission services within there which support families where a child has been identified with an additional learning need. So this, under this post, will be all the early years and support services that we currently have within the Directorate. So they come under one head of service so that we can make sure we get the best of those resources. But obviously the partnership part of this post then is to work, to have the time, strategic time, to work with partners like health, like children's services and others to make sure that their planning is aligned with ours and we tackle the issues, because they're our children, they're our issues, they're all our issues, and our responsibility is to tackle them, as is health, as is children's services. So yeah, absolutely, it's every form of support, Carol, that these families need and the children need.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact about going outside the council, I think, is also a healthy one. I think to get the best person for the role. It may turn out to be somebody internal at the end of the day, but I think it would be right to look for the best fit. And bringing people into the authority also changes the dynamic and can bring in new ideas as well. And I didn't think that you wouldn't be answering me in a way that I wouldn't have expected, Andrew. And I have a lot of faith in you and your team and our cabinet member, because I'm sure he's asked you all these questions before I have. But the one thing you didn't pick up on was the workload. Was it manageable? Thank you, Chair.
I need to come back to you on the workload because I don't quite understand the question, but can I just pick up, because a number of you have mentioned this. I fully expect internal applicants for both posts, but at the same time, I think it's the right thing to do to go external, even though it's a one-off investment. It looks like a lot of money, but if you get the right people, that money will be repaid, time and time again. And if an internal candidate gets it against external competition, whoever they are will be able to look themselves in the mirror and say, I was the best candidate against everybody. So I think that's a real strength. Yeah. Just in terms of the workload, the
workload, what I mean is we're splitting up roles now and responsibilities.
Yeah.
We're deleting one post. We're not overloading the roles then. They're manageable in that way.
Yeah, the intention is obviously going from 2 heads of service to 3 is to give us a greater strategic capacity. So I would be very worried about workload, bearing in mind all those pressures that I spoke about earlier on curriculum reform, ALN reform, the leisure operator, etc. I'd be very worried about workload if members don't approve this restructuring today. Then I'd be much more concerned.
Thank you, Chair. And I wasn't expecting a different answer, as I said, but these are the questions I
yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Chair.
I agree with you that someone from outside is fresh air, but we shouldn't blind ourselves to the fact that we're a very good council for mobile, upward helping people to progress through the ranks as Andrew has done himself and others.
I wasn't suggesting anything other than that, Chair.
But you know what I'm saying. If we got somebody in, but we've got to go outside to see that we are attracting.
Good to test, isn't it?
And we are producing the best as well. Yeah. I think that's what it's all about. Councillor Hale, you wanted to come back?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Andrew, do we know when the early years will be starting up again? Obviously, with COVID, they haven't been able to go ahead. Do we know when they'll be, starting up?
Are you talking about childcare providers?
Yes, in the, they go out into the in the community now. They have them in the community centres and things, don't they? So do we know?
Yeah, I think actually it's the community centres not being open is the issue there, not the early years, because there are early years providers operating now.
Right.
But if it's from a community centres aren't open.
No, okay.
So
And would we be able to have feedback on, attendance to these facilities? Because I know some people who go to them and they're not very well attended, especially for people who need them then.
Yeah, I at the next Education Scrutiny Committee, I can bring a report back around early years childcare providers, no problem at all.
Lovely, thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Is that a legacy hand, Sharon?
No, can I come back, Chair, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, the point I was making was about whether the post should be permanent or temporary. That's why I was talking about external candidates. Otherwise, obviously, we would not predetermine anything and it would be open to everybody. But the main point was, should they be permanent or temporary positions? Because I take up the point on workload. One person has been doing all these roles. And as you said, effectively, as per the inspection report, Andrew. So I would expect that there would be no workload issues if we had two posts. And we would expect, obviously the assurances that you can give us today that all these gaps within foundation phase on early provision for under threes will be there. Thanks.
I think what I can tell you is if members approve this today, we'd be in a much better place to ensure that we can put the arrangements in place for those young people to be ready to start school. Now, clearly, as Sandra said earlier, this isn't just an Education Directorate issue. There are other partners at play here. Health visitors being an obvious one, but also.
Yeah, sorry, Andrew, but health has always been part of foundation phase. That's nothing new, is it?
Health visitors in terms of early years, no, but how they're deployed and how they work is something that we want to work in partnership with health around to make sure that this postcode lottery that we've mentioned before, is dealt with and tackled.
Thank you.
Okay. I can't see any other hands up. Peter, Councillor Rees, do you want to have anything? Have you anything to say?
No, I totally agree with the recommendations. I think this is the way forward, and Andrew is going to lead this team, and I believe that he's got his own ideas, and I think this is the way forward. We certainly, we've got a good Education Directorate. It's been superb over the last 10, 15, 20, 15 years. And I think this is the way forward, Chair. And I totally agree with the recommendations, and I hope that the Scrutiny Committee will agree with it as well.
Thank you very much for that, Peter. Are there any, before I go to the recommendations, are there any other comments anyone wishes to make? I can't see any. Then in that case, the recommendation is on page 7 of your papers, and it's recommended that, having due regard to the integrated impact screening assessment, all the recommendations are as follows. I won't read them all out because you've got them there in front of you. Is there anyone against the recommendation? No. Are there any abstentions from following the recommendation? No. In that case, the recommendation is approved. So I will say thank you for your attendance and thank you for your contributions. I'll see you again next week. Some of you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Best wishes, Andrew.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your support, everyone. Thank you.